County Commissioners meeting is today. Today is Tuesday, August the 9th. It's approximately 9:30 in the morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. To do the invocation, we Dr. Walter Parson from the Sanford Church of Christ, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Zimbauer. May all stand, please. Pastor.
There's going to be many faith traditions here this morning, and each of you, according to your own conscience and faith, would you join me, please, as we pray? Our Father in heaven, we step into your presence. We ask your blessing upon this commission this morning as they meet. And Father, for each one that is here to participate today, to observe, to listen, to learn, to be more involved and engaged in the activities of our own county. Father, we just ask you to be the strength behind all the decisions made, the wisdom in all of the thoughts that are carried through. Father, that you continue to be a blessing to us individually. I'd like to lift before you, Father, one of the county's fallen heroes, one who labored many years for the county, and pray that you would be with him and his friends and his family and those who he worked with. Father, that you would be with the Markopoulos family, that you would be a blessing to Tim's family, that you guide them, Father, as they go forward in the days to come. Strengthen our community to be mindful of that, and individually as we pass into their life. Father, be with all those that are here today. Guide them and keep them. It is in Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Commissioner Zimbauer.
You bet.
We would like to recognize Commissioner Hale from the City of Winter Springs. Commissioner, welcome. I'm sure you hear about the library presentation, among other things. We also have today representatives from the City of Sanford. Want to welcome as well. So, Tom, good seeing you. This time we do our proclamations, awards, and presentation. We have a business spotlight. Ask staff to present.
We're CLX Engineering. We do industrial automation and controls. And so to break that down, that is anything from airport baggage conveyor to theme park automation, do a lot of process control systems and material handling. We were originally founded in Louisville, Kentucky back in 1999, and then we reformed it as a Florida-based LLC in 2009. Because we're a full turnkey automation controls provider, we do the full design. So from project inception, we do the engineering of the project, so the electrical design of the project. We manufacture the panels here. We're a UL 508A shop, so we can certify the panels here before they go out. We test them internally here. Our customers are anywhere from airlines to airports, specifically. We do a lot of work for Universal Studios, have done some work for Disney and other theme parks. In the process control world, we've done work for companies like Maker's Mark. We actually did a huge expansion of their facility in the Kentucky area. One of the things during the pandemic and when a lot of things slowed down, we retasked some of our software, or most of our software group, to create something new, something that we haven't done before, and it's a software, it's a CMMS software, which means computerized maintenance management system. And it's a software package that's used to monitor and maintain systems. And when I say systems, specifically like airport baggage conveyor or material handling conveyor, it actually tracks the maintenance of those systems, and it helps provide feedback on when stuff needs to be done, when a preventative maintenance task needs to be done, what resource is best suited to do that. It also tracks the inventory that's required to do those maintenance tasks. It was a real good software, and the reason we went down that path was we actually had some of our customers come back to us and say, hey, here's something that we need that will help us during this pandemic to help us save costs. With the animatronics side, there is an animatronics vendor that has a design that they want to make move. And so we don't do the mechanical design for it, we'll do the electrical design for the mechanics of a system. We've been consistently growing, managing growth over the last 10 years, 11 years, and right now we sit at about between 50 and 60 employees. The majority of our employees are engineers type, so from software engineers to electrical engineers, controls engineers. We picked Seminole County because we live in the area, and so it is very centralized for the airport work that we do, as well as, easy accessibility to the theme parks. What really sets us apart from our competition is really the employees. And, I'll always go back to my employees because they're a great team, they're really good to work with, and they really put their all, they really put their effort, their life into making our systems great. One of the other things that sets us apart from our competition is the fact that our competition typically just does two-dimensional graphics displays. And so it's a top-down view of the SCADA system, whereas CLX, we provide them a two-dimensional view as well as a three-dimensional view. And so the customer can go back and forth between the two-dimensional view, or if they want to look at more detail, we have an example here of one of our three-dimensional views that they can look at. Future CLX is going to be a slow but steady growth. We don't want to be a Fortune 500 company. We want to be able to maintain a size that allows us to service our customers, slowly grow our customer base without overtaxing the employees.
Good morning. Irma Stengman with Economic Development, for the record, and I'm here to introduce Kevin Wilcox, the president of CLX.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of the Business Spotlight. I wanted to just go ahead and let you guys know that we are continuing to grow. We do enjoy being in Sanford and Seminole County, and the expectation over the next 3 to 5 years is we're probably going to almost double in size, and these are all engineering jobs, high-paying jobs, and we're just happy to be a part of the county. And so I just wanted to open it up to any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you, Kevin. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Herr?
I'll just thank you for being part of the District 5 business operations, and I don't have any questions other than the notion of growth around maintenance. We're seeing a lot of opportunity in that area in the business that I'm in, so that is, I'm just really excited that that's something that you explored during COVID, so kudos to you for taking advantage, creating the silver lining out of what we lived through.
Yeah, and a lot of that came from one particular airline. They reached out to us, and they found that one of the things that was costing them a lot, because we all know during the pandemic, the airlines were literally bleeding money day after day.
Yep.
And so they found that the maintenance software that they used was costing them a tremendous amount, and they weren't actually getting what they wanted. And so after several discussions with this particular airline, we decided to, because we had availability, because so many projects got put on hold, we just tasked our software group to go ahead and create that software. And my hat's off to those guys, because they actually developed a software that would normally take 2 or 3 years to do. They developed it in about 6 to 7 months.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and they did a really good job, and it's already in use at one airport. We've got it in New Orleans Airport, and it's been functioning there for almost 2 years now, about a year and a half.
Where we saw the opportunity was with X-ray equipment and hospital systems. Huge expenditure and not necessarily maintained to the degree that it should be. So then they're making the next expenditure sooner and having worse outcomes. But we were not able to capitalize on it, so I will give you that opportunity. How about that? Outside of our core capabilities.
Commissioner Zimbauer?
Thank you. Good morning and welcome. Do you have any kind of international footprint currently?
Absolutely. So right now, we're doing work at the airport in Aruba. We have done work for a mining facility in Russia. We've done work overseas for Universal in Japan, and we actually, during the pandemic, we had one person for 9 months at the Universal Park in Beijing. We've done work in Singapore. So we try not to go too far out of the country if we don't have to, but when the opportunities present themselves and it makes sense, we do it.
Sure. Well, we certainly appreciate you being here, and we hope you can use this video in promoting your business, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I do have,
Go right ahead, sir.
if I may, it's a bit of a safety concern, and I did want to bring it up to the commission here, and it's because of our growth, that we've had so far and how we plan on growing. We've got a picture up here, and you can see where our facility is, and this area right here is planned for future growth, and as you look at it right now, you see this structure that's on here. That's actually a passenger boarding bridge that we're automating for an airline right now. So they actually brought a bridge in and set it up, and so we're creating a fully autonomous bridge for them. And one of the concerns we have is all these homes that have been built around us. We have a lot of tractor-trailer trucks coming in and out of our facility daily. I'd say anywhere 5 to 6 tractor-trailer trucks coming in daily. And if we can go to the other picture, please. You can see where South White Cedar comes up and connects with 46. On 46, many of you have probably seen there's bus stops there all day, every day. I think there's maybe 32 to 36 stops between morning and afternoon. And they actually stop traffic on 46, and children get on and off the bus there. And as we're having traffic, more and more traffic because of the homes, because of our semi-trucks coming in and out, it just creates a safety concern for the kids that are getting on and off those buses. Plus, the parents are actually parking in the middle of the street on the sides of the roads around Camp House to allow kids on and off. I don't know if any of you guys have seen that in the morning, but
Every day.
it's a huge safety concern, and our tractor-trailer trucks coming in and out, for them to get back to I-4 or 417, they got to turn right to go to 417, or left, they have to come around and do some sort of U-turn to try and get back to I-4. So that intersection is a huge problem, and it's only going to get worse as we grow. And there have been discussions about making a connection, tying this road back into the St. John's Industrial Park, and that would be a huge relief of the traffic in that area, as well as eliminating some of the safety concerns, because now the semis that come to our facility are not going up where the bus stops are.
So I think what we should do at first is, there's a gentleman there's a couple people in the audience. One is Mr. John Dredge. He's a county engineer. He can put you in touch with the city of Sanford as well as the school for kids getting on and off buses. And between the city of Sanford, Mr. Dredge, and the school board, they should be able to work something out.
Very good.
And you're welcome to contact my office, and we'll help shepherd you through that process.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This time we'll go to the library master plan, and we'll hear from our staff to present it.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Richter, Leisure Services Director. For better part of this year, Godfrey's Associates has been working on our new updated master plan for our library system. Part of that process is to take a look at exactly what it is we're doing, what our level of service is currently, but then the second part of that is really looking forward and looking ahead into the future at the growth, anticipated growth here in the county, as well as what the impacts may be on our services that we offer through our library system. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brad and Dick.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Richard Waters. I'm the principal consultant for Godfrey's Associates. We're based in Dallas, Texas. We're a library consulting firm that's been in business for 40-some years under three different names. I feel like this is a bit of a homecoming because in the late 60s, early 70s, the State Library of Florida embarked upon a project to get county libraries in Florida. There were none at that time. And the then director of the Orlando Public Library, Glenn Miller, not the band leader, but the library director, was asked by Virginia Grigg, a staff member at the State Library, as to who he knew who might be able to do a consulting project for them for the fee of $6,000. So I was asked to do that, and so the first county library study I done was right here in Seminole County. So you can either thank me or blame me for having a county library in Seminole. But I subsequently did about a dozen libraries, studies of the same nature, all the way from Key West up to whatever the northernmost county is. That's the background for why we're here, and I'll turn it over now to my colleague and oldest son and architect superior, Brad Waters.
Yeah, for the record, I'm Brad Waters with Godfrey's Associates. I'm going to try to see if I get the notes up here on my computer screen while I talk to you. As Dick mentioned, we've done a lot of work nationwide, internationally, and in Florida, especially 26 library systems here in the state over the number of years. And one of the things we've learned is that for libraries to be sustainable, we have to be really sensitive to operational costs. So our process utilized a multi-pronged approach. We looked at quantitative and qualitative data through multiple community engagement forums. We looked at the demographics of the county as well as the 7 largest municipalities within the county. We did a peer analysis for neighboring library systems in Florida as well as some in the southeast United States. And we assessed the existing conditions of your system versus the state standards for public libraries and as well as industry standards nationally in terms of best practice. There's some people believe uninformed opinions are that the public library is dead, and this survey from Gallup was right before the pandemic started, kind of showed otherwise, where libraries are gone to twice as much as most any other leisure time activity. As you can see the numbers there on the screen. The majority of Americans have library cards. Nationally, it's about a 60% clip. In Florida, it's just over 52%, but in Seminole County, it's over 70%. So you're doing a good job here, and the staff are very much appreciated. Wrong way. Here we go. One of the most recent studies of many that have looked at the return on investment for public library investment was done in Texas, our home state, where a $4.64 return for every dollar invested was a good number. That happens to be on the low end of most of these other studies, which actually were pioneered here in Florida back in the early 2000s. From that survey, which was part of that community engagement process, we had over almost 7,000 responses. We heard a lot of good comments. Almost everybody thought that the library, they were satisfied with library service here. One of the things that we particularly asked was how did it compare with where you came from when you moved here from Seminole County, and over half said it was as good or not as good as where they came from. And when we asked the question about is it worth raising your taxes, the majority said yes. The large number of those people said it depends on what's in it for me, which is not uncommon either. Looking at your budget, compared to the peer comparisons, you are dead last in terms of dollars per capita. And you're about a little over 2% of the total county budget, where nationally we see that more like a 5% number. In terms of library space, it's not surprising that since you built your libraries in 1986 and there's been no additions, that you're kind of falling behind the curve in terms of meeting the state standard which is 0.6 square feet per capita as a minimum. So you're about a third of the way there, half of what the Florida average is, and close to half of what the national average is. So here it is graphically illustrated. So you see the blue is actually the square footage, the yellow is that 0.6 per square foot, and then the black line is actually the population. Florida standards, 0.6 is a minimum, 1.0 is the maximum or the ideal, and that's that black line. So not that we think we can get there anytime soon, but maybe something to aspire to. The lack of space creates a domino effect, and public computers is one casualty, you might say. Also, the fact that your buildings were built when the personal computer was kind of a novel idea for most people means that there's not a lot of places to plug those computers into that building. But you're, again, 1/5 of what the Florida standard is there. The good news is one way that we would recommend to bridge that gap would be to go to loaning laptops, both in library use and to take home. People could take them and that don't bring their own devices can sit anywhere in the library and use that, and we can eliminate some of the footprint of some of those desktop computers. In terms of collections, you're, again, doing pretty well here. You're close to the Florida minimum standard. You're close to the peer average. This is actually a photograph of the Oviedo Library, which is, we'll use this in all our presentations from here on out. This is about as full of a set of shelves that we've seen anywhere. And so it really proves the point that you've added books to the collection without adding space to the buildings. And so it makes it really difficult to reach items that are too high or too low. It's an ADA compliance problem that can be rectified with more space, but it also means that it makes it harder for people to find things on the shelves. And retail studies after retail studies show that less stuff on the shelves actually sells more merchandise, and that's proven to be true in libraries. From a staff expenditure standpoint, other side of the ledger, from revenue, again, you're not quite as bad. You're off there. You're about half of the other standards for Florida minimum and the peer average. Looking at, in terms of library staff, you're, again, about half of the minimum standard for Florida. And again, that's not a space issue. As we'll show you here in a minute, that library staffing is not necessarily directly proportionate to the amount of space. In fact, if you design a building well, a staff-efficient building, you don't need as many staff as if you don't. So maybe that goes without saying. Some of the things into the future that we're looking to do that most libraries do around the country, and you do here, but again, limited with space, is preparing the residents to be ready for the workforce, whether they're young, old, or they want to change jobs, or newly moving to the community. ESL, GED, those kind of things, writing resumes, even having the technology now to participate in an interview, which a lot of times is online. They may not have that at home, so they have to come to the library for that. We look at some of the other things that libraries do. They support small businesses and entrepreneurs with not only facilities, but software that the startup company might not be able to afford, or technology like a 3D printer. Here's an example of what has happened a couple times in libraries, where a teenager actually used a 3D printer to design and build a prosthesis for a younger kid who was outgrowing them too fast for his parents to afford new ones. For $14 in materials, the child had a new hand. Now here's where we can show you how you operate currently. Central Library, the largest building you have in Castleberry, has about 35,000 square feet of public service space, and the rest, at the bottom line, there's the system support, is the back of house, the support functions that serve the entire system. So when we compare central public service with all the other branches, which are totally public service locations, we see that the fact that it's actually larger by 3 times as much space as the branches, but only costs about 1.5 times as much to staff, shows how much more efficient you can get by adding space without adding staff. So that's one thing we see here. One of the things that we see is that actually the East Library in Oviedo now has actually eclipsed Castleberry in terms of the amount of business they do, and that's at that price is quite a bargain. In terms of sustainability, again, it's really about making the staff as efficient as possible through investing in customer self-service and automation technology, building new buildings that might have a 75-year lifespan that are adaptable to future change in terms of infrastructure, and then they're net zero energy buildings so they consume less energy and therefore cost less to operate. So we look at where you are now located in terms of the 5 locations you have, the blue circles, plus one for Altamont Springs, which closely matches the central library. So a lot of redundancy there. Altamont Springs, obviously not a county library, but still a public service outlet. We start to see the gaps in between these 5 locations. So there's in central Sanford, there's missing some coverage in Winter Springs, Heathrow, and then even out in Geneva and Chuliota, no service currently. So one of our goals in this master plan is to find ways to fill those gaps. In terms of attaining the goals of the master plan, again, that investment is certainly something to consider. You've got a very popular library, so I think if you went to the community, they would be supportive of expanding the library system. We've actually spoken with the municipalities of Sanford, Winter Springs, and Oviedo about the possibility of them finding sites that they thought would help locate a new building in those locations. So we start to fill some of those gaps that we talked about. And then there's a number of ways to secure non-traditional revenue streams. So looking again, let me see here. Where did I go? Oh, sorry. Here we go. So starting to close those gaps, one of the early things we can do fairly inexpensively is putting a kiosk, which we'll show you a picture of here, a vending kiosk that has self-service in Heathrow and probably Geneva. That would be a low-cost item and a fairly quick fix to support those communities. But then looking to relocate a library to a more centralized location in Oviedo, one more central in Sanford potentially, although we've had discussions with folks in Sanford, and I think Tom may want to, maybe he wants to chime in on this, I believe. An alternative to centralizing Sanford would be to maintain a downtown location for their economic development. And then a new library in Winter Springs to close the gap between East and Central. And then we look at eventually upgrading Central Library. There we would relocate the support functions we talked about, maybe to the 5 Points location. That gives us more space in the building for public service, so we could expand the public service there. When we look at the census numbers for both Altamont Springs and Castleberry, we see that they are even more densely populated than our 5 of the largest, most populous cities in the United States, including Dallas. So there's more people per square mile in those 2 cities than there are in the city of Dallas. So we think maintaining the central library as a primary location is very important for that population. Eventually, we relocate the west branch, moving it closer into the county so its reach doesn't span beyond the county borders as much as it does now. And then eventually rebuilding the northwest branch, maybe as a joint use library with the Seminole State College as a possibility as they expand. And we've seen a number of those. In fact, in Broward County has a couple of very good examples of those joint use libraries. Eventually, long-term, say in 20 years, there might be or maybe sooner, a kiosk in Chuliota, but then long-term, we'd look at building a new branch in Heathrow and a new branch in Geneva. These things all as the population dictates in the long term. Now this is a picture of the kiosk we're talking about. So it's a modular, expandable, it's movable, portable. You can actually have Wi-Fi from it, so you can come and swipe your library card, borrow a book, return a book. It's 24/7 access, so it's a very good outpost, kind of a pilot project kind of project to look to new locations to see how they work for service for you. Recommendations in terms of space, again, it just really comes down to more space, We look at those 3 new 35,000 square foot buildings in the first phase, hopefully in the first 5 years, and the 3 kiosks we talked about. Second phase in 10 years, we would hopefully do the central library by moving the back of house in central to 5 Points, renovating the building in central, and then adding the 2 more branches in west and in northwest. And then over the long term, looking at maybe future branches in the other parts of the county. So the graph now updated over 20 years into the future starts to show how you would step up the space over time, and it's kind of phase in those different facilities. And then finally, if we do add another library in Chuliota, we would probably get to that 0.6 square foot per capita in about 20 years. You want to talk about this, Dick? We've looked at a number of other joint use opportunities, and I'll let Dick talk about these.
You're looking at a Little Italy branch library in Chicago. Chicago Public Library has built 3 new branch libraries in the last couple of years. All of them have affordable housing as part of the project on top of the library. We pioneered this concept many years ago in St. Paul, Minnesota, when we relocated the Rondo Branch Library from a old bowling alley location to a new structure which had the library at grade, and then parking above the library, and then above the parking was 3 or 4 levels of housing. And that project turned out to be very successful, and part of the beauty of it was that the developer paid for much of the cost for the library in terms of the infrastructure and the constructability of it. We think this is a concept that is going to sweep the country, because we've got right now projects in your county, Florida. We've got a project in Bellingham, Washington. We've got a project in Temple, Texas, and we have a project in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And in every case, one of the real needs in the community is affordable housing. And this is an opportunity that the Seminole County Public Library could play in addressing that affordable housing by having apartments of 3 to 4, 4 to 5 levels, whatever the case might be, on top of the library with adequate parking and an adequate footprint. So we highly recommend this to you as a way to move forward and address not only the need for more library space, but the need for more housing. I don't think there's any chance that Seminole County as a population center is going to stop growing. You're going to have more people coming here for a variety of reasons. There's going to need to be more library space, and there's going to need to be more housing. And here's an opportunity to kill the proverbial 2 birds with 1 stone.
In terms of staff, again, we believe, and now that we have we received the compensation study you've just gone through, we can now project what the operational cost will be for these new buildings, which we will do. Again, I believe we will find that you may not even need to add much staff to staff a bigger branch library. Again, if it's designed properly, easy to supervise, and we automate some of the staff functions to streamline workflow. We add customer self-service, and then we eventually we kind of backfill the number of professional librarians you have with paraprofessionals at the lower pay grades. We'll be able to staff up these new buildings with very little extra operational cost. I think there are some more higher level positions as you expand the system that you need a better span of control administratively. So there'll be some high level positions to be added, 3 or 4 at the upper end of the system. But other than that, there won't be a need for a lot of additional staff. Again, technology, you may, for the people in the audience don't know that RFID tags in books are like toll tags for books. They help with self-checkout to speed that process for the customer, and they also let the library have better control over their inventory. Again, lending laptops, tablets, hotspots for people even to take home helps bridge the digital divide, as well as people using technology they may not be able to afford otherwise, and becoming used to that, and that helping them from a job training standpoint. And then another trend we see is having some sort of a limited amount of secure after-hours access space for people that may work shifts and can't get to the library normal hours. They can come pick up a book out of the locker that you've already invested in, or use a computer to do email or whatever. But that is, with a camera, access with a library card. It's being done. It has been done in Gwinnett County, Georgia, for about 5 years now. And then finally, how do you pay for it? I mean, there's a lot of different ways that libraries are paying for these things, and including, again, other kinds of revenue streams. One of our recommendations will be that you establish a library foundation for private money, but I think the support is here from the people for the library, and I don't think that'll be an issue that needs to be resolved. So again, one last picture of one of those Chicago buildings where the library's on the grade and the housing is above, but as Dick is fond of saying, the future belongs to those who plan for it. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you. Before we go to the board, Ms. Cheney, do you have any written requests?
I do. The first one is Tom Tomerlin.
Was he finished?
He said he was finished, wasn't he?
Yeah.
That's what I heard. I apologize.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, County Commission. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. As your library consultant just mentioned, really I'm just here to speak in support of keeping a library in downtown. I'm also very unaware of what kind of timeline we're looking at, but we've proposed to them a site in our downtown that's literally across the street from our History Center. And the History Center is kind of the best kept secret in Sanford, right? It's a terrific museum. We have Fort Mellon Park, a heavily used park. We have a convergence of Riverwalk, Fort Mellon Park. We think a library would just lend itself really well to that. Having worked in economic development, I should back up, Tom Tomerlin, City of Sanford Economic Development. And that's basically the capacity I'm talking to you today is economic development for the City of Sanford. One thing I've noticed, and it's been accelerated by the pandemic, is economic development has shifted from the utility of a location to the experience of a place. All right? And basically I wish I could take credit for that statement, but the experience of a place is becoming more and more important. And we think we have all the right stuff here in the downtown. It's a 30-year overnight success. And I use that number 30 years on purpose because we have a CRA that's going to expire. There's no upping it, right? 30 years in existence in 2025. In just a few years, that CRA will go away. There has been no stronger partner in that CRA than this county commission. You've been there at the outset and have always put your millage and tax rate into it, and you've made that partnership a success. So that 30-year overnight success, all the city's been around since 1877 it was incorporated, but really the progress that's been made over the past 30 years, it seems like an overnight success, but it really hasn't been. And we think the investment that we were able to make back into that community for things such as streetscapes has made a big difference in the renaissance that we see now. So that 30-year overnight success. So I really just wanted to speak on behalf of economic development for the City of Sanford that your library consultant made it very clear that libraries are just not about checking out books. They are, in essence, business centers, right? They're a place where it's probably the first stop for anybody that says, I'd like to go out and try to start my own business, right? It's really their first stop. And your library staff is they're more on the front lines of economic development than anybody that has the label economic developer is your library staff. And I can certainly attest to that. So I would just encourage I can certainly understand the position and your consultant is doing what they need to do in terms of trying to find central locations that service the larger population, but I just ask that this county commission consider the benefits of basically keeping a library downtown for that experience of place and how that's going to multiply that convergence of all these attributes we already see in downtown. And I think I'm going to end right there.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Please, Tom, when you go back to your city, which we reside in here, please thank them for their continued cooperation and partnership with the county.
Well, thanks so much I feel like there's never been a stronger relationship between county and city, and we have a lot of things on the horizon. speed bumps on the road, of course, but we think things are bright, and this library, frankly, got folks excited. You know, it's a terrific
good
thing. Thank you.
Commissioner Lockhart?
Yeah, good to see you. The property that you say you've identified across the street from the museum, is that already owned by the city?
It's not owned by the city. And therein lies a challenge, right? This property is greenfield development, it's undeveloped. The two property ownership groups that own the 4 parcels that comprise it is 2.82 acres, but it's more than 2.82 acres because you won't have to consume stormwater infrastructure. It's on our stormwater master plan area. So in essence, you're talking about a 3+ acre site because stormwater's taken care of. That is in private ownership. And they're willing owners, or I'm sorry, willing sellers. They're willing sellers. And being willing sellers, they will eventually sell. We were very cognizant of if we tried to carve something out of Fort Mellon Park, the geometry of it just didn't work that great. And you know that park is beloved by the community, and it gets quite a bit of use. So an ability to kind of carve out a square, if you will, into that park was a little bit problematic. But the land parcel that I did share with your consultant group is 2.82 acres in size. It's really a little bit more than that because the stormwater infrastructure is taken care of. And it's literally across the street. If you know where Serenity Towers is, it's right next door to that, which there's a synergy there as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Tomlin.
I think, Commissioner...
Yes, Commissioner Lockhart?
I think the opportunity for partnerships with our cities and other organizations is something that we absolutely have to capitalize on. And I know that each one of our cities has, well, except for Altamont, of course, which has their own library already, would have a stake in the game of helping to see this plan come to fruition. So I expect that we'll have a lot more conversations like that with other cities with ideas and how they might be able to partner with us financially as well.
Is it appropriate for me to respond to Mr. Tomlin?
I'd like to go through all the public input first, and then we'll go to a rebuttal if there is such a thing, and it's not really a rebuttal, but additional comments, then we'll go to the board. Commissioner Shaney?
Ann West.
Good morning. I'm Sheba West. My nickname is Sheba. Most people know me as Sheba. And again, I'm Ann West. I've been a 17-year resident of Seminole County. I voted for many of you.
Can you give us your address, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you give us your address, please?
Oh, yes. It's 458 North Sundance Drive, Lake Mary, Florida, 32746. So I'm actually walking distance to the library, and I also serve on the Library Advisory Board. So it's a privilege to be here. I have used that library for 17 years. My kids grew up here. My son was the salutatorian of Lake Mary High School, and I actually believe that's all linked to these public resources that we have. I work in Seminole County. I've always worked, and our Friday night date night with my kids was to take Philip and Sangeetha to the local library. We would check out whatever books, movies, whatever they wanted, and we'd go home and have an amazing time reading books and, watching National Geographic, together. And that's part of the reason why I continue to live and work in Seminole County, because that tagline is real. Florida's natural choice. I've worked all over Central Florida, but I continue to love living in Seminole County. I am so happy that this community has chosen to do a master plan. We really need to consider that our county is growing. New people are continuing to be added to our community on a daily basis. And you can see through the report that many of the items with the library programming are underfunded. And I want to talk about funding because there's probably, in my opinion, a gap in concurrency. When you look at a concurrency report, there are things that are itemized there: roads, parks, schools, water, wastewater, all of those things. One of the missing elements for concurrency is libraries, and we've had plenty of new development within my lifetime and the time that I've been a resident in Seminole County, and no new libraries have been built during my time living in Seminole County. And so, some of these ideas that have been presented where they're paired up with developers, these are conversations that I hope that the planning department is having with new development that's occurring within the county. So the funding, we're almost starting at a deficit, so we should consider that. And then also, I think I would support millage. I've supported it in the past with acquiring natural lands and all these other items. So just want to say as a citizen that I would support millage. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Shani.
Rosemary Clausen.
Good morning, Chairman and other Seminole County board members. Thank you for letting me speak this morning. Do I need to say my address? Rosemary Clausen, 105 Oaks Court, Sanford, Florida.
All I was going to say, if it's not protected, you need to say it.
Pardon?
If it's not protected.
Oh, no. So I read the wonderful article in the Orlando Sentinel yesterday on the master plan and Seminole County. And I was glad to see that kind of promotion for this effort. To me, libraries are an indication of quality of community. And every community I've lived in has had an excellent library system. I was surprised when I moved to Seminole County from Orange County. We've lived here now for 12 years, but I was surprised at the library system, the facilities themselves, how small they were, and in some cases, how underdeveloped they were. In terms of the bathrooms, for example, and just the general facilities. And the one thing that I also find has been left out in a way. This report, they talked about that we were dead last in terms of dollars per capita spent on libraries. And at my time on the Library Advisory Board, the other thing that has constantly we've been aware of is the working conditions for the librarians themselves. When you visit the libraries and you see the space that they are working in, it's tiny, and it's filled with materials for citizens, for children, because there's no other space to put it in except for where the librarians work. So they have these little desks, and then all around them are these materials that they're using to put on programs for the public. And that's good in a way, that they're willing to work under those circumstances. In another way, it's not so great because it doesn't show respect to me for the work that they do. And this is the thing that I noticed in the article that was in the Sentinel. And also when I reread this morning the comments from citizens about our library system that was in the master plan. People talked often about how wonderful the librarians were and the wonderful service that they offer and the great programs for children. Meanwhile, they're underpaid. And they're working in these little tiny spaces. So I think, I just wanted to bring that to the fore, because a lot of times in careers that are oriented towards service, like teachers, for example, we talk about what great service they offer, and they're underpaid. So I think we should be grateful for the service that they do offer, but we should also be aware of the fact that these are people who have skills and expertise, and we need to reward them for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No more speakers.
Is there anyone else? That was the last written request. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the board on this topic? Anyone in the audience?
I have a couple.
Commissioner Hale?
I haven't filled out.
And can we have staff give her a cordless mic, please?
Or take out your...
Good morning, everyone. Thank y'all all for having me here. I'm Tiana Hale. I'm from the city of Winter Springs, and I just wanted to make sure I came here today and let you know how excited I am for this opportunity, and I'm excited to work together with y'all. We have some really exciting things that the timing couldn't be perfect for us to really open that discussion and have these talks. And so I just wanted to tell y'all I'm so proud of being here in Seminole County and seeing what's coming. And I just wanted to say I am supportive as a commissioner of Winter Springs of where we're going. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience would like to speak to the board? Please come down.
Hi, I'm Alexandria Garner, and I've lived in Seminole County since '91. I'm at 432 Elliott Avenue. Just like some of other speakers, we have used the Seminole libraries, especially Sanford downtown, but Castleberry, Lake Mary, what have you, Oviedo, we've gone all over chasing books often for school or for projects. It is a sense of community. I have in all these years watched some of the quality of the library, the physical spaces y'all have mentioned, go down. It's family members have commented that some of the book selections have been limited. Of course, it's been sort of augmented by the online. But I think the loss of at least some type of structure, as Mr. Tomlin said to have a downtown library would be just tragic almost. I mean, there was a rumor once that it was going to go to maybe to Midway, and I thought, gosh, if I had to go in a car, I'd never go. You know, there's just different things, right, that keep it going. My in-laws use it all the time. It's their entertainment now. So just to keep it going and flowing, and if there's something that needs to be done, if a millage or what have you, I would certainly be in support of that and would hope that the county would continue to make the city and the county's benefits merge, because we are really one physical space. So.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the board for a closed public input? Public input is now closed. Commissioners? Commissioner Constantine?
Yes. First of all,
we'll just go right down the line if that's okay. Sure.
Thank you for the presentation. I think all of us have been looking forward to this, because there's not a person that, when you're out in the community, that doesn't recognize the value and the importance of just the accenting our quality of life when you have good library system. It was concerning, I think, to everybody when you look at, because we have so many things where we're number one, that we were so far behind in funding. I think that there's a lot of parts that play in that. The demographics of our own community and the way the system developed. I will tell you that when I had to research a book as a 9-year-old, my mother from Bear Lake Road had to drive me up to Sanford. That was the only library we had. And so, obviously, it's the situation has changed a great deal, but obviously also with these recommendations, I think there's a lot of potential for improvement. I love the idea of the affordable housing on top of the libraries. We own that property. We have the space for the parking, and the fact of the matter is that access to that type of educational opportunity for citizens such as that, which may not have the access to the computers and everything, I think is just a natural selection, and a way to augment the entire education process. I do want to say that, it was a particularly unique situation that Altamont Springs got its own library. I was there as a young city commissioner when we did that, but it was basically because we couldn't get Seminole County to get a library in that area. So we developed our own library, and I think that now we have grown to the point that when we're looking at Winter Springs or other areas, we should start looking at that private or that public-public partnership with our cities, just like I think that we could really be aggressive, Rich, in looking at, private partnerships when it comes to the libraries. One thing that is unique, and I do want to tell you, since we have so many library aficionados here today, I'm excited about the fact, and it's finally going to happen because I've been begging Rich to get it for us. We had a wonderful citizen that has donated nearly $1 million to our library system to put in 7 English as a second language pods. It will be unique to Florida. We talked about this before, but we're finally going to get them this month, right, Rick?
That's the plan.
That's the plan. And we'll be putting 1 in each of the locations in Seminole County, 2 in the central branch, and 1 in Altamont also. So that is a unique circumstance where you immerse yourself. All the bells and whistles are already in this pod, and you immerse yourself in whatever language you want to learn, or whatever, or if you want to learn English as your second language. So it's going to be an exciting thing, and I believe that no other system in Florida has that. So we continue to try to augment our education and our library system, but I think that we need to maybe, we've felt that people were so satisfied with our libraries in the 94% that I think that we've maybe got a little complacent, and I think that we may really want to sit down and take a look at how we can continue to press and push the envelope so that 94% will continue to be continue to be the standard. I do want to say, and I don't know if anybody knows that, but I'm going to show this to Commissioner Lockhart. It's National Book Lovers Day today. So this is a perfect day to have this presentation.
I'm sure they planned it that way.
Obviously, but I want to thank, again, this, and I love the recommendations, and I think that's a great starting point from where we need to be.
Commissioner Lockhart?
Thank you. I had the opportunity to visit each one of our libraries with Christine Patton not long after I was elected, and spent some time talking to our library staff and to patrons. And as wonderful as this report is, and it is incredibly detailed, all I had to do was walk through our libraries to see that we were in trouble. The level of service from our librarians is excellent. The quality of the facilities is not what this community is deserving of. And of course, coming from a school district background and seeing the partnerships that we have with so many of our schools near some of our libraries, and the symbiotic nature of that, it was shocking to me, honestly, how much work we had to do. I think we need to look at this from a perspective of how many different tools can we have in this toolbox, because it's not going to be just one thing or another that's going to get us to where we need to be. And certainly we're not going to get there overnight. I'm so glad that you acknowledged that, because I think sometimes when we see presentations like this, the perception is, okay, now we're going to fix it, and next year we're going to have all these great new libraries. And we know that that's just not there. Not only is it not practical timeline-wise, but financially, we have to figure out how we're going to pay for this. And so from my perspective, I think partnerships are critical. They're absolutely key. Both our public partners, cities, school board, Seminole State College, every entity in this community has a stake in this game, and hopefully we'll be having some very good, detailed conversations around exactly how those partnerships can come to fruition. A dedicated millage, I'm definitely open to that concept. I know it is not, not everyone loves that idea, but we have a dedicated millage for fire, we have a dedicated millage for roads. As our population increases and as our values increase, maybe we need to look at a dedicated millage for the things that automatically do need additional support as we grow. Every year we have, and boards before us, we have the budget that comes before us, and we look at, it's a competition of a lot of really great things for who gets the same pot of money. And when it comes before this board, unfortunately, time after time, things like libraries don't get the increase that they may need out of our general fund revenue. So that's one of the reasons I had asked Tim to provide us a breakdown of our current spending and how that our current millage is allocated to each of these types of resources, so we could just get a level set and a baseline to kind of have an idea of where we're at with that for those discussions that may be able to take place in the future. Sales tax, this is infrastructure, and I think if we're hearing from our partners how important this is, those of us who partner together in the sales tax initiative, this might be another way for us to reimagine the sales tax. The way we've done it in the past has been great, and it's been for a lot of very important things, but our community is telling us loud and clear that there are things that they see and investments that they would like to see made, and as we look at renewing the penny sales tax in 2024, I think it would be very wise for us to look at including some of these quality of life type issues that can benefit the entire community. Another thing that I noticed in your report, which was not news to me, but glad to see it's not just in the realm of education. Our students love paper textbooks. When we survey them, and we thought at the college and the K-12 level, we thought, oh my gosh, students are going to love being able to be on their computers and have their textbooks digital online. They didn't. Many of them, if they could get a paper textbook, that's what they wanted. And to see that our library patrons were also asking for more paper materials was just confirmation that it wasn't necessarily a generational thing, but paper's good. Paper's not bad. We do need paper. So anyway, I have lots of other thoughts. I was happy to spend the time with Rick and Christine and go over some of these details. We have to be willing to imagine into the future, talking about the future, what this is going to look like and how we're going to creatively tackle this, because it's definitely a need.
Commissioner Herr?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I thought it was excellent. I would also say a huge congratulations to Rick Durr and our team, because we are doing more with less, which is really amazing. And while there were a lot of comparisons in this study that were made around the notion that we need to line up with others, I would tell you that you may want to use us as an example of ways to do things. More is not always better. Don't take that for all the library supporters in the audience that I don't support the notion that we need to be better either, but I don't want to understate what has been accomplished with very little investment by a team of humans that cared a lot. That matters often more than the investment. So I would tell you that we have a lot of happy customers today. The mission would be to make sure that we have happy customers in the future as well. I like the concept of a joint use facility. I don't know that it's only limited, and I don't think that was your intention to say that it's limited to affordable housing. That's certainly a very exciting opportunity. I would ask that some members of our team make sure that this idea is socialized with some of the private partners around the community. The idea of establishing a foundation just for libraries seems a little bit disconnected to me. We already have a Parks Foundation, and I would like to explore the possibility of using one foundation instead of two. A donor can always dedicate their donation or designate their donation to go to a specific area of it, but supporting infrastructure for two different foundations from a county perspective does not make sense to me. As the District 5 Commissioner, I'll shout out to the City of Sanford that moving it out of the downtown area of Sanford, I really would not support that. And I also want to point out that while the consultant used the term Heathrow is not a municipality, it is a gated community, and we would not support moving a library to a gated community for anyone who wants to take that out of context. There is a gap up there in a portion of the community, but it would be in that general vicinity, not in Heathrow. I say that out loud to be cleared because I live in Heathrow, and so I don't want to be accused of that later on, not to call you out on that nomenclature. And I would also say that we're dead last in funding per capita for libraries, but that's not because we're using library money to fund other sources, from my perspective. That's because we're also one of the lowest taxing districts in the state. So I don't want to have someone believe that we're using that money to fund other things. We are just a very lean, mean operating machine, and that's our reality. And that's what we have historically supported. So I, too, would look for opportunities for funding that may be creative, that may be outside of how we've thought of things in the past. But if we're thinking about funding opportunities, this is a recurring expense. It has to be a recurring fund that funds it. That is my perspective. This isn't a solution that we can take from reserves to move into. All we're doing is kicking the can down the road in that sense. So that's my perspective, but I appreciate your presentation. I thought it was excellent. And I most of all appreciate our team and the volunteers that sit on the library board as well.
And the Friends of the Library.
And the Friends of the Library. And the kids that read the books and the dogs that lick them.
Commissioner Zimbauer?
Well, a lot has already been said, and that's the luxury of going last.
You have not gone last yet.
Well, okay, next to last. I agree with much of what has already been said. I think the key to this is we need to have a candid and honest conversation that libraries moving forward are not libraries as we have known them. Two things that strike me is there's more of a need that's already been identified here, but in addition to that, something in the flavor of a cultural arts type aspect that would be plugged into our library system for the public to be able to enjoy, as well as community centers, multi-use rooms. You know, you take, for instance, in my district, you know, we have the Oviedo Library, but when we get really out in the rural areas, the rural folks have no place. They have nowhere to have a community meeting. They have nowhere to have ballet for the children or gymnastics or dance or yoga or anything else that so many times these libraries would also accommodate for the public. I think we need to have candid conversation with our city partners and what they're willing to engage financially and help support the library system. You know, we have the cities do their thing, the county does their thing, but we also partner on many things. This is one that we should be partnering on in order to leverage what's best for the overall communities with all 7 cities. I also have always been a fan, as I talked to the consultant, I think it's been almost 2.5 years ago now in my office, is as this county grows and we start to do infrastructure improvements for our fire department and other buildings that people who work for the county will engage with and go to work every day, there is an opportunity to have a multi-use, very much like was displayed in the study, a library with affordable housing above it, but you also have the opportunity, as we know we're moving forward, to build fire stations. And fire stations should also be considered as an aspect of how we leverage that with affordable housing as well as a library system. I also think as we become into the 2045 period of time, we may be better off and better served with more library systems, yet a smaller footprint that's easier to get to much like these kiosks, but even smaller buildings where people could actually, in that certain community, engage in instead of driving 5 or 6 or 8 miles to get to where they want to do something. So for what it's worth, I would support us having continued conversation with our partners in the 7 cities and how we actually pull this off.
Thank you. For my comments, first of all, I want to thank not just the consultants, but our staff. Christine, your staff is truly phenomenal. We've said that for years. It's amazing when you go into the libraries, what you all do with and how you get things done with less. It's truly amazing. So please tell your staff that I think I'm hearing from all 5 of us the same story, the same comments, so please tell your staff that if they're not listening. I'll also tell you, about 15 years ago, we did a countywide survey of libraries to the public, and everybody wanted us to expand the libraries, but also in that same survey, it said that it would increase, who to pay for it, and at that point, nobody really wanted to pay for it, and that's why the county didn't. That's one of the reasons why the county didn't move forward with it, and that was about 15 years ago. It's time to actually make that change and actually start investing in the libraries. I'll also tell you that, as you heard here from the staff, as well as some of the people that sit on the Library Advisory Board, and I was definitely listened to Sheba a couple times, not just in these meetings, but outside of these meetings. It is about the community. It is about family. That's how I view libraries. In fact, I've said this many times in past meetings, that I see libraries as an economic engine, and if not even just an economic engine, but also like an old town piazza. For those people that have traveled in other countries, you can see squares and piazzas where people would congregate. That's how I see libraries. It's a congregation of learning. It's a congregation of how families get information. As Sheba was talking about Friday night, date night with her family, so thank you for saying that. I also think that this presentation should be presented to the 7 cities as well as the school board, and I would encourage the board and our staff to do that. That's how we're going to bring people together. I think it's important that we look at what libraries could be, but we don't really understand what they could be because the future's changing. Who knew that smartphones are going to take over the way it has? And I agree with Commissioner Lockhart that, people do like paper. I do as well. I'm just as guilty. So I don't think libraries are going to go away anytime soon, but there needs to be that delicate balance of technology and old school books. And I think that's why we hired consultants that focus on this, because they can advise us on that. As the plan is presented, I see yes to all these locations, but I think the devil's in the details. I think, yes, that it's going to be done in phases. I also think that we need to bring not just the cities in, but the Friends of the Library. They are a not-for-profit. They have given quite a bit of money to the county over the years for expansion. And I think that if we sit down with them and also give them this presentation, that they'll also be another partner for us and also a voice as well as a funding partner. And if you don't think they're a voice, when we talked about going to 4 days a week, libraries open, they were definitely a voice, and they were camped outside my office as well as other commissioners' office for weeks, reminding me how important libraries were and are. So if they're listening, I understand that they're a voice. You don't need to camp outside my office. I hear it.
We're not talking about privatizing.
We're not talking about privatizing or anything like that. I like the idea about affordable housing, and I think that's why we should present it to the 7 cities. I think by doing that, they can help us do that. But most importantly, I think that we should ask our staff, and Rick, your staff's done a phenomenal job, as you always have. I mean, it's just what we expect, and you guys produce every time, to bring back a plan and how to pay for this. I think that as long as we're willing to do this in phases, and you come up with some ideas, not just you, but your staff and the consultants, about how do we, eat that elephant that's sitting in the room, obviously one bite at a time, and I really believe that this can happen. So my takeaway from what I'm hearing from the board, yes, that's what I'm hearing from the board. And what I'm hearing from the board is bring back a plan on how to move forward. That's what I'm hearing from the board. Commissioner Herr?
I think you're hearing from me, bring back a plan on how to fund it before we bring back a plan on how to move forward.
And I said that, bring back a plan on how we're going to fund it. I said that.
Okay.
That was one of the things that I said. Okay. Mr. Applegate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have to acknowledge what a great report by our consultants. Thank you. Rick, a fantastic job. And we heard from citizens this morning. Christine, your staff, I mean, just amazing. And we have a list of assignments here from listening to all of you. We will start working on that. And it's a great idea to have this presentation not only to the cities, but to the Friends of the Library as well. And we'll start working on that as well. And on the affordable housing, as you know, in my prior life, we talked about these things around the country, and they are phenomenal success stories. So thank you for that.
And I also went to one of the community meetings, the one of Vito, when they presented, and the community is engaged. They were definitely vocal at that meeting, weren't they, Christine? Very vocal. And Commissioner Lockhart?
On the conversation about foundations, we touched on this a little bit in my briefing, and Gerlin, I think, Gerlin is going to hopefully look into the type of foundation. In my world, foundations are direct support organizations that are much more intertwined with the public agency. The foundation, the Parks Foundation currently is its separate own 501c3. It's not a direct support organization. So I just had asked if there could be some legal opinion about whether or not we could have an official DSO for a governmental entity.
Any other comments? Thank you very much to the consultants. Thank you very much to staff. Appreciate you, Christine. Okay, at this time, we're going to move on to the Seminole County Parks and Recreational Facilities ADA Initiative. Mr. Durr?
Good morning again. For the record, Rick Durr, Leisure Services Director. One of the initiatives that we had programmed in for this year was to create our own ADA audit of our parks facilities. We're talking 40-plus individual facilities. And specifically, what Mr. McGovern is going to speak to you about is having a transition plan. I can say that I was very, very pleased that we ended up on the positive side as many times as we did. And we look forward to working in the future to go ahead and implement these over time. But without further ado, here's John McGovern. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is John McGovern, and I lead the accessibility practice at the WT Group. And what I wanted to do on the next slide was just walk through our scope, and I control the slide. So briefly, what I'll talk about is the goals of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the purpose of the act. I'll talk about the requirements for existing sites and how we address those. I'll describe our process so that you understand that and our deliverables. I'll talk about the transition plan. That's the key deliverable that you're required to have. I'll discuss the benefits of compliance. And then I'll talk a little bit about a role for the public and then some next steps. So the goals and purposes of the ADA are, I think, pretty clear to everybody. The ADA is 32 years old as of this summer, and the intent was to make civic life accessible to people with disabilities, and of course parks and facilities and programs. But it's important to talk about the why behind that. By 2030, there will be more people over the age 65 than there are under the age of 18. And you might wonder why that applies to this. The typical incidence of disability for a community as a whole is around 15%. For people over 65, it's 42%. So adopting a transition plan and beginning work to make sites and facilities truly accessible, it is important for today, but it's even more important for what Seminole County will look like in 2030. As far as some of the specific mandates within the Act, of course, the overarching issue is including people with disabilities alongside people who don't have disabilities. So that touched on our scope, and I'll talk about that in a second. Second bullet point is, of course, to design and build new sites to be accessible. The county's done a good job of that and should make sure that that's a high priority item going forward. The third key item is to audit all existing sites. There are no sites that are grandfathered under the ADA. So every existing site does have to be audited, and then the county's required to make a transition plan to make those sites accessible. And then last but not least, there's a pretty broad requirement that county communications to people who have disabilities also have to be accessible. So that includes websites, that includes broadcasts of meetings like this. So the ADA covers, it's not just about facilities, it's not just about employment, but it covers programs and inclusion as well. Let me talk briefly about the requirements for existing sites. First, counties are required to evaluate existing sites. Title II is really clear on this. Title II is the portion of the ADA that applies to the 89,000 plus units of state and local government. And the evaluation of existing sites, no matter how big the jurisdiction is a requirement. The transition plan, the third bullet point on the left, is only required for communities with 50 or more employees. So certainly that's not applicable to you, but if you do the evaluation, even if you're a small city, you still need a plan for how you're going to make the retrofits occur. So we always recommend to jurisdictions of any size that they too develop a transition plan. On the right, and this isn't just about Parks and Recreation, even though that was our scope, the NRPA, the National Recreation and Park Association, Commission on Accreditation for Recreation and Park Facilities, does require a fresh access audit every 10 years. There are several other accreditation programs in law enforcement, for example, that have similar requirements. So to a certain extent, this is a statutory and a regulatory requirement, but it's also a smart practice that's recognized by associations around the country. I think a key part of this is the fact that the standards are not finished. In our work, we use the federal standards and Florida requirements that were more stringent. But there's a gaping hole, and that's trails. Trails, beaches, campsites, viewing areas, even picnic areas do not yet have a final and enforceable standard. You still have to make the program of trails accessible, but there's not a final standard for you to follow in doing that. So we recommend as a smart practice that you adhere to the highest federal level writing regarding trails, and we've included that in our site reports to the staff. On the right side, I think it's important to emphasize the timing issue here. In our transition plan recommendations to you, we recommended that you make retrofits over an 8-year period. You can certainly change that. The good news is it's your decision. If you want to make it 9 years or 10 years, because of resources and other issues, you can. You just need to be able to justify why you're doing that. And I would urge you not to have a year in which you don't make any of the transition plan retrofits. You want to show that you're always acting in good faith and pursuing the goal of making more of the county sites compliant with the ADA requirements. Public feedback is also important. I think on an annual basis, as staff come to you with CIP proposals and budget proposals that relate to the transition plan, invite the public to weigh in on the priority order of retrofit that you're being presented with staff. And I think lastly, blend this with other plans. The ADA should not be a silo apart from CIP and master plan and playground replacement schedules and parking lot replacement schedules and everything else. So take advantage of this and you'll be more efficient. Our process, we first focused on sites and audits of those sites and preparing site reports. We then talked to department staff about how they invite, analyze, and fulfill requests for reasonable modifications from people with disabilities who want to participate in programs alongside people who don't have disabilities. Third, we had some soft tasks. We did some plan review and some staff training. In fact, we're closing with staff training on September 6th coming up. That'll be the last 2 sessions that we'll do. And then last, we built the transition plan, which phased work out, as I mentioned, for 8 years. We also included cost references for planning. It's hard to make a cost estimate when there's not a design, and design wasn't in the scope of our work. We did use RS Means, the industry guide, for estimating costs, but Means has not updated their ADA costing document since 2004. So we add a 50% multiplier to it, and that's about as close as we're going to get without a design. Last but not least, we're reporting to Seminole County leaders and stakeholders, and then we'll remain available to give staff advice during the implementation. Deliverables, 43 very detailed site reports. We don't have digital eyeballs or feet, so we measure everything when we're at a site. Staff got very detailed reports that include the deficit, include a citation to the standards, include a recommendation, and include a cost. We also did 3 staff trainings, and we'll be doing 2 more coming up. And then there's a final report that summarizes our work that the staff has as well. So again, just a bit about the transition plan. It's just a tool. It's a way for you to look ahead and see what work would be done in an order of priority. It's not a master plan. It's not a facility assessment. But you should try to blend it with other tools like that. It is something that's useful for staff, but it's also a tool for transparency. People who live in Seminole County, they want to know when the playground next to their house or at the park that's next to their house is going to be made accessible. So this helps your residents have a better understanding of where you're going. It looks ahead. I talked about the 8-year schedule. I want to make this second bullet point really clear too. You're not required to make every park accessible or every asset at a park accessible. If there's a park that's a mile away and it is fully accessible and it has the same features as a park that is not accessible, then you can leave that site as is until it's later altered or changed for another purpose. So Title II is really clear about this. The Department of Justice has issued some good guidance on this. So it's a good way for you to look at the programs of the parks, not so much the built environment at the park. Our total cost references topped $11 million, but out of that amount, a big chunk of that was smart practices or related to areas where there's not a final and enforceable guideline. So our phase 1, 2, and 3 are the ones that we think you should pay the earliest attention to. So phase 1 included low-hanging fruit or work that you could do with current human and fiscal resources. and also recent work at sites that are non-compliant, that are new. So remember earlier, I talked about the test for new requirements or new construction, and that has to strictly adhere to the 2010 standards. Phase 2 included park assets like playgrounds and sports fields. We set that at 3 years at a little over $500,000. Phase 3 includes complex or costly or retrofits that are not yet subject to Florida or federal regulations, and we peg that at a little over $400,000. So altogether, you're pushing 3 here with about 7 to 8 of smart practices and work that we think is county option. I think a couple of benefits of ADA compliance. One is just risk management. This is an important mandated requirement. We know a lot of counties and other jurisdictions that have not done their transition plan and have wound up being forced to do their transition plan by a federal agency or by a court. So you're doing the right thing by stepping out and doing this voluntarily. I think it's also an issue for employees. Certainly Seminole County employees who have a disability deserve to have a workplace that is accessible and compliant to them as well. And again, you can be proactive here and not reactive. It's always less expensive to be proactive regarding compliance issues like this than it is to be reactive. We often see access be a function of 3 things. One is design, the other is installation, and the other is maintenance. And the county has complete control over the maintenance of your sites and facilities. So throughout our report, we emphasize that as an issue going forward. We did see a couple of safety and access interfaces, and these are just examples that I think help illustrate the issue. If I'm a wheelchair user in a restroom and the sink pipes are not insulated and I don't have feeling in my legs, I could scald my legs. So it doesn't happen very often, but it's certainly an important issue, and it, I think, emphasizes the risk management piece of this. I'm going to bet every one of us has walked through a door with a closer and had the door hit us somewhere on the way out. So that's an easy fix. That's a door pressure gauge that costs about $39, and putting it on maintenance checklists so that staff can check door pressure and then adjust the closer so that you have a more accessible door, but you also have a safer door. Changes in level or gaps in exterior accessible routes. In the safety world, they're called trip hazards. In an access world, they're called a barrier. It's going to stop me from coming to this meeting. And certainly playgrounds and trails and elevators and maintenance are an important part of this too. I think when you think of maintaining an elevator, you think of keeping it in running order so it'll go from the first floor to the second floor to the third floor. But it's critical if I use a mobility device, if I can't get to the second floor by the stairs, then the elevator has to function. So a lot of things that we think of as just maintenance for working conditions are really a key ADA compliance issue. We talked about a role for the public. I think I'd highlight considering an advisory panel regarding disability issues, or considering for your existing boards and commissions, looking at and recruiting persons who have disabilities but also have an interest in that particular area. That makes their feedback more available earlier before you're forced to hear it. Next steps, congratulations. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of counties and other jurisdictions have not taken the step that you've taken, so you deserve a commendation for that. Rich set the tone from the beginning, and if we had a question, and we did have questions, Michael always had an answer. It was a pleasure to work with both of you. continue to act in good faith. I talked about that a little bit earlier. And we're here to help when needed. This is all we do at the WT Group Accessibility Practice. We've helped over 500 counties and cities meet their ADA obligations, and we'll do that for you when called upon. And I'll stop there after this slide. A couple of compliance strategies. It was clear to us that more risk staff or more training and awareness should be on the table for staff. More maintenance in facilities and parks, and this is important because the 2010 standards, when they came out, think about a park. Grass and dirt is the predominant surface, but grass and dirt are never accessible surfaces. So more maintenance of different types of routes is really important to occur. Budget annually and make the expense for retrofits, and encourage consistency in how the departments invite, analyze, and fulfill requests for reasonable modification. And I will stop there and answer any questions that you have.
Before we go to the board, Cheney, any written requests? Is there anyone in the public that'd like to speak to the board on this topic? Anyone in the public? We're going to close public input, go to the board discussion. We'll start with Commissioner Zimbow and work back down. Commissioner Zimbow, that way you're not last.
Well, thank you. I don't mind being last.
Okay.
I think this is all good work, and thank you, and thank Rick and everyone and your staff for moving this forward. You know, I think, this is an important topic. When we think about people with disabilities, they don't have the ability, many of them, to get out and enjoy the natural lands. And we don't have to look back too far and understand during a pandemic when people were in their homes, not getting out, these people were disadvantaged. And there's nothing more that feeds the soul than being able to get out, watch the birds, watch the animals, watch the trees, smell the fresh air, and access the same assets that able-bodied humans are able to access. So I think this is something that we absolutely have to consider and should consider. I think we should also ask our staff to look at any and all federal and state dollars that may be able to be gathered to push and promote this. All new assets, of course, we should make sure moving forward, even if it's a missing link or some other attribute in the existing parks and trail system, that we look at that overall access of the new portion going in and how we connect to the existing portion. So I 100% would support this initiative, so thank you all very much.
That's a great point. There is a connection between new and existing that's called the path of travel, and so there are some factors there to consider.
Great.
Commissioner Herr?
I do have some questions. Thank you. Great presentation. So slide 17, P1.
Yes.
And so low-hanging fruit and recent work at sites that is non-compliant. Are you telling us that we did recent work at sites that's not compliant?
Yes. We see this at literally every jurisdiction. A good example is restroom grab bars in the accessible stall. Your designer got it right. It's supposed to be centered, it's supposed to be between 33 and 36 inches above the floor. The installer centered it at 36. That automatically made the top half of the grab bar out of the range. It automatically fails. So it's a combination of getting the design right, making sure the installer knows where it should be, and I think some smart practices. Don't tell them 33 to 36. Tell them to put it at 34 and a half. And that way, even if I'm off because I had a bad day, I'm still going to have an inch and a half of space to meet it either way.
Okay. And so there's probably opportunity for contract management there as well. Did the training that you did include our risk management team? Because I noticed later there's a reference for potentially adding to staff, which always makes me nervous, but also a reference for risk management to be trained.
We met with you want to help answer this? We met with the ADA coordinator.
Yeah, Christina Brandolini was a part of our original discussion. We worked with some of her team. They were invited to the 2 different trainings we had, and they'll be invited to the upcoming trainings as well.
Michael,
Okay,
can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Michael Worsing, Park and Recreation Division Manager.
Thank you. So Christina is HR, risk management. It falls under a different department. I'm just going to give a shout out that risk management, if they weren't involved in these trainings, needs to watch the recordings. And that would include all of that team, because that has to be an integral part of the other set of eyes that looks at this. It actually is, this is a huge risk to the organization. And then from a budgeting perspective, I don't recall, because this is not what I do well, is recall budget line items, but if we don't have a separate line item that's calling out our investment in ADA, we might consider doing that, even though right now it probably falls up under the departments of parks and all of the other communications that we do, because it doesn't, you said it very clearly, this doesn't only pertain to this piece of our organization, but it wasn't in your scope to look at the others. We may want to think about that from the perspective of, if we get audited, it is right there. Just, I've seen other organizations do that extremely well. And then just a question, does the reference to disability refer only to physical disabilities?
Oh, no. It includes persons with compromised immune systems. It includes persons on the autism spectrum, sight impairments, hearing impairments, Alzheimer's, dementia. So, no, it's intended to be a very broad definition.
So I asked that question, to be quite frank, knowing the answer, because the presentation appeared to only focus on physical disabilities, and just to be clear that that is not our only focus as we try to make sure that we are compliant with this. There has to be a broader scope to our thought process. But I appreciate the presentation, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. And certainly in the site reports, which are much more detailed.
Exactly.
We address everything from signage to alarm systems and so forth.
Commissioner Lockhart.
Thank you. Also, I'll reiterate the thanks for the great presentation. I think this is something that the board initiated us going down this path a couple of years ago in a work session. So it's wonderful to see this come back to us, and from my perspective, this is a non-negotiable. So however we can start implementing the recommendations, be supportive.
Rich Constantine, any comments?
I'm just going to agree.
Okay. The only comments I would have is, first of all, thank you. I think we should have some type of a board, as you stated, for ADA compliance issues, and allow the citizens to be a part of that, and what criteria, who sits on that board, or at least some criteria. I'd like to see a financial plan, even though you have dollar figures listed. I think it needs to be a little more detailed-oriented, and I think that we should adopt this. Can we do that today?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Commissioner Herr?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If I might, I left out a slide.
Okay.
Hate when that happens.
In next steps.
This happens to be what we're talking about.
I mean, we were recommending that you direct the staff to review the information. They have a ton of information, and it's very detailed as to costs for each retrofit, and then direct them to prepare a plan that effectively implements that, and then on an annual basis to prepare and submit an implementation plan to the board.
Okay. That's a great next step, but I think we should also have a motion to accept this as presented and direct staff to the next steps. Commissioner Herr?
So the word adopt freaked me out a little bit, which is why my hand jumped up like that. Because the design was not in the scope, using a 2004, a price estimator that was designed in 2004 and putting a 50% incremental charge on top of that is nowhere near what today's prices are going to be.
We don't have to adopt it, but we can accept the plan and ask staff.
Understood that modification, so I do understand that.
Is there Commissioner Zimbauer?
I'll make, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Zimbauer.
If you want to go ahead and make the motion,
I was just going to make a motion to direct staff to prepare and submit implementation plan to the Board of County Commissioners for
Second.
acceptance.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes. Commissioner Zimbo, you had something else to say?
Just a question for staff. Do you believe we have the capability to rank these projects in a matter of importance based on usage, access, et cetera, et cetera? I'd like to know how that's going to function. I understand we've got a lot of things to look at, but are we going to prioritize those assets the public is enjoying at a higher level than, say, ones that they're not?
Absolutely. First, John has been so kind in his implementation plan, or at least a transition plan, to also say, here's where you
Excuse
should...
me, Rick, point of order. Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Rick Durr, Leisure Services Director, that he's got a list of what he believes would be priority items that need to be dealt with. What we'll end up doing with this, just so that you can see how we're going to use this tool, is exactly as a tool. So the next time we're coming before you with a CIP, this information will be basically integrated completely into the CIP, and you'll be able to see exactly where the priorities are.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rick. Thank you, Michael. Okay, this time we're going to move on to a presentation.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a 5?
We could take a 5-minute break. 5-minute break. back to the dais? If we can have our board members come back to the dais. Will we all take our seats, please? We're going to move on to item number 4, which is presentation from staff regarding technology. James?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, James Grutzos, Chief Information Officer for Seminole County. Members of the Commission, today Rebecca Hammock and I wanted to get you an update on an initiative that the board approved, which is redesign, re-engineering of our permitting and land management process. The board approved bringing a consultant in, and for the last few months, the staff has been working with them to identify our needs. This is one area that I know I've spoken to each of you about. How do we improve the corporate cholesterol that we have here, where we've built up a number of systems that sort of talk to each other, but in the end, both the citizen and the employees are frustrated because of the technology that doesn't work. And so we brought this consulting firm, Chris from Plant Moran, is going to review the findings and the next steps. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, honorable members of the Commission. My name is Chris Blau. I represent the team at Plant Moran. We are a management consulting, audit, and tax firm located all throughout the United States. We have 30 staff who actually live and work here in the great state of Florida. While we do not have a physical office here, we do work with organizations in the mid-market, and we are working with local governments throughout the country. And I'll be pleased to share with you some of the experiences and insights on behalf of our team who worked with yours over the past 7 months to present to you the findings of our permit project here this morning. And so with that, I'd like to be able to share some insights with you and also with the team and our project managers behind me, be able to interject where appropriate, give you an overview of where we are at today. Thank you. Where we are at today and where we could be going in the future. So with that, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the project and talk about how the members of our citizens, our community, and our business owners would benefit from the investments that are looking to be made. All right. So this morning, our agenda is really to provide an executive overview to you, to talk about some of our objectives, our goals, and some of the upcoming Board of Commissioners' involvement that we would see as partners in this process. We know that the 20-year-old technologies that underlie and underscore a lot of the business system components you have today have come to their term. And it's now time to start thinking about what does it look like as we continue to scale our ability to serve. So digital transformation is not just a buzzword. You hear about it in public, private. Our citizens, our customers, the customers I serve in our public sector consulting practice are all about wanting to make sure they can respond. And I think that's the most challenging aspect of public service today, is that there are many customers with many different types of needs. And here we are trying to serve those disparate needs, and sometimes they're in direct opposition to one another. And so the folks who enforce our building codes and are supporting this project are a cross-section of 5 different departments. There are 40 different subject matter experts that cut across every aspect of the permit life cycle, from occupancy all the way, from concept all the way through to occupancy. And so today what I wanted to do is to share with you what were some of those things that we saw across our leadership team, as well as some of the things that we did together to give you a 360 view of what permitting looks like here in Seminole County. We began with the voice of the customer. The business processes and the county's technology capabilities that are represented by the leadership that you see on the slide today, whether we're looking at the Development Services Director, their managers, whether we're looking in specifically to the County Information Systems team, or we're looking at the permitting experiences of the team that I represent, who have not only worked with communities here in Florida, but also in Silicon Valley, in Southern California, and in communities that are facing the very same growth pains and the growth challenges, and being able to serve while being able to expand their capacity to serve a growing base of citizens and developers. Okay, so the lens that we're all taking gives us something unique that we all bring to the table. And together, this team presented a cross-disciplinary review of the business opportunities and the business challenges that exist within the permit land management space today. That's not just within development services, by the way. That's public works. That's fire. That's your public safety team. That's environmental services. And so, as James had mentioned at the opening, the public does not distinguish a permit from one department versus another. They see a unified process. And the challenge behind that is, again, the IT manager had indicated, we have 21 different business systems that support those functions within the county today. And we all want to be able to tie those together. And that is no small undertaking. So how can we proceed? How are some ways for us to be able to break some of those barriers down? And so what my team has done from Plant Moran is that our dedicated public sector consulting group has not only worked with 30 different Florida jurisdictions, 12 of which that are highlighted here, to talk about ways that they have overcome some of these challenges, but also to help you assess ways that you can better interpret your business constituent needs. And every jurisdiction's context is different. The makeup of the community, the type of development, the service levels are vastly different, okay? And each of you, as policymakers and as decision makers, have a perspective that you're looking for your county to be able to deliver. And so what we wanted to do with this assessment and this study is to provide you some perspectives, not only as to what's going on in Florida, but by what's happening in some of America's fastest growing communities. So my team has had the privilege to serve in Silicon Valley and work with folks in the city of Sunnyvale, California, in the midst of redevelopment. I'm currently working on an implementation at the city of West Palm Beach, which probably many of you know has a $4 billion backlog of commercial construction in the pipeline right now. So public sector jurisdictions throughout Florida are confronted by very aggressive growth, on top of being able to keep up with the pace of demand, which has been this year, in fact, setting some records for your county team in development services. And so with that said, I would like to be able to share some of the considerations that we took into account for the scope of this project. So whether you're a homeowner building a deck, or you're an economic developer who wants to make a significant investment, predictable outcomes and consistent processes drive business decisions. We understand this, but getting immediate access to information on status is a significant effort when you have so many different partners involved in a process. And I think all of us know that the overlay elements of the review process do appear to create obstacles. And what we want to do is create more transparency. And so that's what these systems are really designed to do. So how we get there is the next question. And so in terms of defining our scope and our objectives for our project, we looked at the following. First off, we want to look at a commercial off-the-shelf system that we can configure and design, but one that will actually support and match most of the business needs that we have. So I'm going to speak to you as a technology consultant and tell you right now is automation is not the solution for everything. Automate where appropriate, but where it's not appropriate, we need to step away. And sometimes in our processes, we have very good reason why we don't automate things. However, we don't want to make that the answer to every problem. We have many opportunities to automate and create some efficiencies across the different departments we've worked with. And in replacing 20-year-old technology and looking at what we can do to scale, we have a lot of opportunities to try to simplify some things. And I'm going to show you some examples here, just a few moments, of what that could look like, okay? And you can actually talk to some of the jurisdictions in your vicinity here and in the region that are actually doing many of these things. So nothing that I'm going to share with you this morning that our teams have researched and our work that we're sharing is revolutionary per se, but it's how you bring it to life, okay? It's how your teams embrace it. All right, so in terms of optimizing what our future use cases could look like and really seeing how the citizen interacts through getting timely and relevant information, let's show you a couple examples of what that might look like across the team. So in terms of our objectives, a uniform permitting experience is something that we certainly want to be able to look to provide. So whether I'm looking for a right-of-way permit, or I want to just be able to put a deck out in front, or maybe I want to replace my water heater, it could be anything in between. When we respond to population growth needs, we know that the scale of service we provide, as we are seeing today, today you are doing clear over 95,000 inspections a year. That means those are touch points with service providers that are installing any number of life safety needs, building safety needs, or just making sure we are enforcing environmental code as we should. So when we look at ways to be able to help the customer have more access to self-service and maybe even the ability to self-apply and actually secure a permit independently, we're going to explore what that could look like. We're also going to look at ways that the team can show how they're being more efficient. And I know one of the things that's more and more people come to live here, your growth trajectory is about 12% in the next 5 years. So you're going to add another 50,000 people. And when that starts to happen, that workload on your team not only becomes twice as much, but then you have more coming, and you have your existing citizens to serve as well. So we have to be able to look at ways to be able to show the productivity across the team. So things like providing online self-service and instant self-service permits, for example, open up doors for folks to gain some time in their day to be able to afford more critical intervention, looking at more complex scales of development. And as we look to multi-use and as we look to commercial development, as we heard earlier this morning, those are the things that are going to drive more of our attention. And so those are the sorts of things that we were conscious of as we undertook the study. So from a project team organization, I mentioned we had 5 different departments involved in this project that are service delivery, Public Works, Development Services, Information Services as a support team, Environmental, and Fire. Okay? Each one of those has different components of the development process from concept all the way through to occupancy. So to that end, the sponsorship across our team needs to reflect each of those leaders in those groups. Because if we make a change to a process in one part or one department, then that has a domino effect with respect to how that could be administered across each stage of the review process. So whether it's going through planning with Rebecca Hammock's team, whether it's going through the building development process, and we're working with the building team, the public doesn't discern the difference, but they do see interactions between different providers of services and enforcement at every level of the review. And so we're creating more of a shared point of reference through this process. And in terms of organization within departments themselves, we have to look at the process owners. Each of those process owners is administering a very discrete part of your code. Things like the law that changed this year, in fact, in May, the governor approved the bill for the 30-year recertification for commercial multi-unit condos. So we know that how we are going to be inspecting existing structures and how we are going to make sure that those are safe, regardless of where you live in Florida, is a new standard we have to meet. As these new standards come to life, our systems of record have to be able to respond to them, and we have to be compliant. And in this particular case, we have 2 years to catch up with any condominium or commercial structures that might be multi-story. I use that just as one simple example, is that the codes we enforce today are going to evolve, and our systems of record need to be able to respond with them. The only way that happens is if the teams that you see here continue to be integrated in their review process. And so with that, when we turn to the subject matter experts behind, these are the people interacting with the public. These are your customers. These are the people that are actually going to be the linchpin behind whether or not they see that this solution is going to serve them well. And so these elements and these folks here have been tremendous advocates for our project and have given us some of the feedback that you're going to now receive in terms of our outcomes. So when we look at the permitting operations, whether we're in public works, traffic engineering, watershed management, public safety, addressing, we see elements of different requirements that we're putting together and sense as a coherent picture. And so when we look at that further in development services, whether it's land development, land division, whether we're looking at new designs for improvements, whether we're looking at environmental impacts. We talked about stormwater here with the library conversation. Those are all the issues that are going to continue to come before you. And so they're only going to become more complicated. So how can we help you get a better vision as to what is actually occurring with all of those reviews that occur? And so it's something as simple as recertifying your flood certification because you remortgaged your home or you're securing new financing, which goes through your building division, or it's something that you want to just simply get a permit for the AC changeout you did for your house. Okay, those types of transactions will be combined with all of the more complex reviews that you have that come before you. So with that, our project approach took us through a needs assessment phase that I'm referring to now. Our goal was to really represent what would the business objectives be to secure a commercial off-the-shelf system to facilitate our customer interactions. And now we're developing a scope of work. And that scope of work is going to go out to the vendor community who specializes in a lot of these different types of systems. So many of your counterparts all of you have an experience where you've probably worked with a jurisdiction to have a review process. Some elements might be online. Some elements might require you to come to the counter. Some might require a physical inspection, whereas some jurisdictions today are doing remote video inspections. And those are things that are not just during COVID, but after COVID too. Okay? So many jurisdictions are choosing ways that they're going to provide levels of service, and that's what that scope of work is going to look at, is what specifically would we be looking for in a solution that would serve us. And then that will proceed into a selection process where we'll be evaluating vendors, and ultimately a contract will be coming before you for consideration to enter into an agreement with someone and a team who's been very fluent in being able to deliver these types of systems. And so with that, our objectives, as I mentioned earlier, we've identified over 95 business improvement processes through our assessment, and those are all tagged, and we've identified where specifically we can win as a team, end-to-end, for every review process that we have. So there's a little bit of something in it for everyone. All right, now those processes themselves, I think we looked at over 30 different processes and identified different ways to be able to accomplish some of the tasks that we have that might involve a lot of complicated handoffs or unnecessary time that we can eliminate. Okay? Just a simple status check. We have over 70 calls a day that come into development services that are nothing more than what's the status of my review. What if we automated that and could provide customer self-service to answer that one question? We could probably give back 2 hours of time to every customer service representative at the building counter today. That's just a very simple turnaround. That's a very simple win, but yet something that we're seeing more and more of your contemporaries that are looking to employ these types of systems. So in terms of looking at accessible resources, responsiveness, fairness, and equity, whether you're an owner-builder or whether you're actually someone who's in the business or a citizen who just wants to know what the impacts are in their neighborhood, each of these types of considerations was looked at within the different process mapping experiences that we've worked with the teams. And that's going to be our blueprint, literally, for the construction of the new system. Okay? So we want to make sure that those outcomes are the same ones that we're going to look for, that are going to be ours, and not necessarily a third-party vendor articulating what those will be. Okay? That's very important. So the second, when we process diagram these elements, we also identified the systems of record, and we looked at ways to be able to identify what those systems are doing and how do we make sure that that knowledge carries forward. So a lot of the work that is done by the groups have many archived considerations. Building codes that applied a couple of years ago might be grandfathered. Okay? We have to make sure that we're consistent in our interpretation. And therefore, just because we're changing out a system doesn't mean the history of that information becomes non-relevant. We have to carry it forward. And so these are the sorts of things that we're coming into this discussion to know where the information comes from for the processes that we administer. And that makes us a much more informed agency. And quite often, that's an Achilles heel for a lot of folks that want to go into this process because they kind of see the system of record as their own, not necessarily 6 different departments all working together as one. Okay, so when we looked at our process maps, that was really a very powerful tool set that helped us come to where we are today in making some recommendations to you. So what we're looking for and what we would like to present to you today is an overview of our process. This summer, we're going to be looking to take that scope of work to market, and we're going to be looking at prospective vendors who can provide these services. And they are certainly out in the marketplace today, providing different levels of service depending upon the needs of the agency. And this fall, we're going to be looking at demonstrations and looking at how those systems could potentially be a good fit for your teams, and there'll be a lot of involvement from your development team as well as your reviewers. And then moving forward into January, if we're fortunate to have a selected finalist, we're going to be going into some negotiations. And then on the early Q1, early Q2 in March, we'll be looking at coming before you with a possible contract. Okay? So that implementation process would begin in earnest next year. So the timeline on this project is pretty consistent with the majority of clients that I'm working with today. We know that the wheels have to turn in the right sequence, and we all have to be on board. Okay, this isn't something that we just cycle out every year. Most folks who do this, they do it 2 or 3 times over the period of 15 to 20 years. Okay, so just from a sequencing perspective. All right, so we so value your engagement as partners in this process, and we wanted to share with you what that would look like going forward. So while I'm a technology consultant today, the challenges that lie between us and success are people and process driven. We have to agree on what we want to produce, and if we are each doing it our own way, it's not going to work as well. And so that leadership, that examples comes from your team all the way into all the directors and the staff. They need to see that cohesive picture. And then the public benefit of what this looks like is going to evolve. What the system will be day one will not be what it is 2 years from now. Guaranteed. All right, what we're doing on our mobile phones today and mobile devices will be different in 2 years than it is today. And we found a number of areas in the county that are just simply not blanketed with coverage. And that's a problem, right? If we want real-time service, but we don't have the capacity to actually do an inspection on site with a real-time connection, we have to make accommodation for that. All right, so those are the sorts of things that we're going to need to roll out and manage expectations around what we can really deliver. And we'll be looking to help present that to you so that change can be communicated to the stakeholders who do business with you and the county's businesses. So from an awareness and advocacy standpoint, it's both internally facing as well as to the public at large. We know that communication in advance of these changes goes a long way. Getting your development community as partners in the process, actually have them participate in piloting the new capabilities is a great way to go. And then they become advocates and they become users, the initial adopters of the new technologies. That's where success stories have really turned into catapults for doing new things with technology. You need to have some stakeholders who buy in. And they certainly do with the investments that they make when they go through the development process. So with that, we have a few recommendations for your consideration, and we'll be happy to receive questions. We would like to make sure that a uniform permitting experience does mean that processes can change across departments. And sometimes when that happens, the ownership of those processes has to be one that comes back to this body. The budgeting for this project, the investment that is looked to be made is in the neighborhood of $3 to $5 million. And there's that's an estimated range due to some inflation, but also there may be some unforeseen factors here as well. That's not just direct vendor outlay. That also is augmentation for your team. Because when you're putting a new system like this in, you also have to serve your customers. You don't just turn off the lights and say, well, we're not going to do permits for 3 days. Right? We have to be able to handle the intake and manage that process end to end. So what we want to be sure we do is we can anticipate where the workload will be for the project so it doesn't outcompete the customers that need service from your county. That's a balance, okay? And a lot of implementations can be grind to a halt if we can't get the subject matter expertise to participate, okay? So swapping on a new system when you're at the busiest time of your history is also a very significant undertaking. And so that investment is when that will consider those aspects. And then the governance around the decision-making process for making process changes is a shared one. It's not just development services, and it's not just going to be environmental, it's going to be the team. All right? And we need to make sure we have the mechanics to make those decisions together and coordinate them so that we can roll them out in a very predictable way. Okay? And so with that, I'd be happy to receive any questions that you may have, or the team. It is a privilege to be before you this morning. You have some very committed staff, and they are delivering very, very well. I have the opportunity to work with a lot of different communities. I'm working with 6 in Florida right now, and I will tell you, you have commitment and buy-in, all right? And that's great. You have energy to do that. Now we just need to make sure that direction is clear, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. Before we go to the board, I'd like to go to the public. Jenny, any written requests? Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak to the board on this issue? Anyone in the public? I'm going to close public comments. Public comments is now closed. I'm going to start with Commissioner Lockhart and work down. Commissioner Lockhart.
Thank you. Love the coordinated approach, and I want to get from a historical perspective, and if you don't know the actual names of the software that's currently being used in the other departments, help me understand which current software programs in these individual departments that are going to be replaced with this implementation. Are we talking MaintStar? Are we talking, can you just run through them for me?
Yes, that is one of them.
Okay.
Excel. Few access databases running around. Okay, so there's, single user databases out there. Certainly, the HTE Naviline system you have today is not going to have a continuation path, right? There's a different succession for that. We do have a summary of some of those systems put together in a document that we could make available. But basically, yes, we've identified those. And then we've identified those that we might want to retain an interface. We're not going to just cycle everything out. But we do know that many of the permits that are being generated by, let's say, Mainstar, Mainstar its purpose is a little different in its purpose. It's a maintenance management system, as the gentleman a couple presentations ago talked about. It's not designed to be a permitting system, right? So sometimes we're using some of these tools in ways that they weren't optimized for.
Right.
So as we do more,
Okay, that's great to hear. And I don't know, Commissioner Delary may remember years ago when Commissioner Morris was also on this board, there was a spreadsheet that was created by the then Information Services Director to try to get a handle on all of the different pieces of software that were being utilized all across the organization. And I don't think I'm exaggerating if I say that there were 100-ish. Because every silo wanted its own tool for the way that they wanted to use it. And so it was all over the place. So the fact that we're here and having this conversation, I think is super exciting in 2022. And I think not only is it going to be a benefit to our internal customers, but when you talk about not just the building community, the development community, but hopefully there will be a way for those in our community who want to keep tabs on what might be yet to come. I heard that this parcel is going to be developed. I don't know what it's going to be. Could an average Joe citizen be able to log on and look at where things are in the process and know the details?
the answer is yes, that is
Awesome.
possible.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think that's something that will also help, because I think some of those 70 calls of where is this in the process isn't the developer. It's not the applicant necessarily.
Sure.
It's neighbors and community members who want to be informed. And we as a board have made a commitment that we're going to have that transparency available. So if this is a tool to help us with that, amen. Thank you.
You bet.
Commissioner Herr?
So I did not see a mention of minimizing variability. You did say consistent in interpretation, and those are two different things. So I just, food for thought, want to make sure that we're looking for consistency in outcome as a driver of this. We don't want one permit to be treated differently than another permit. We've had recent people standing at that microphone about that issue. And I've been public about the fact that part of my path to run for office started with a permit for my roof. I mean, so the opportunities for improvement I think are significant, and for building efficiency. I would also say that I noticed on one of your slides, 15, plant, your assistance in 3 to 5 is at the county's option. I absolutely think we have to have you ride this whole train ride with us. I'm just going to go on record saying that. I think I've seen these types of programs being implemented many times, and you think, oh, we may save a little bit of money by eliminating this, and the cost to that is huge. So I'll just go public with that. And then I think engagement is the key. So we have to be extremely thoughtful, and I'm looking out at Christina, who's back there doing work, around making sure that our employees engage in the system and the processes once they've been done and your input has been given and your input didn't get taken, that you don't find an alternative path. So I would say that we need to put engagement in this system as a component of performance reviews for any department that's involved in this system. It is too big of an expenditure not to hold people accountable to the taxpayer for using it. Last thought. Thank you.
Understood.
Commissioner Zimbauer?
Thank you. Can't happen quick enough for me.
Yep.
It's, I honestly don't know how we've gotten along the way we've been operating for years, to be honest with you. The efficiencies and the automation, once embraced by our staff, will bring, good service to the public, but it's got to be user-friendly for the public. However, that said, automation is great. What I'm very, very concerned about that we also don't want to lose sight of is the ability of that personal touch when needed.
That's right.
I mean, we've all been on those automation calls, do you want to use your keypad or you didn't want to use voice command? And you go around in circles to only find out that, I mean, I did it yesterday with FP&L, and I finally just said, you know what? I'm not going to do it. And people just surrender to the system because they've come to understand that is the system. And we have to have that ability, as user-friendly as it may end up being, there's going to be a certain aspect of our society that's either not computer literate or doesn't have the ability to navigate a system, that we have to have that ability of just push zero and talk to an operator to get you in the right place.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
but I also agree that the consultant should stay on board to completion. And I'll tell you my main reason, because if it doesn't work out, I want to come talk to one person, that's you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Constantine?
I think everything has been said. I just want to be able to push, instead of keep saying human being, I want to be able to push zero and get to a human being. But it would be like anything, when you go to automation, make it simple, make it direct, and we've all been struggling with this for a long time, so I'm not going to repeat the good suggestions that have been made already, just to say that I'd love to see this happen as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you, Commissioner Constantine. The only things I'd like to add is, and I don't know, Commissioner Lockhart, if it was hundreds or 100, but there was pages of programs. I can't honestly tell you how many, but there was a number of them.
Yes.
Pages.
Yeah,
It was painful to see it.
it was.
The only two comments that I would have is be that your timeline, I think it may be aggressive in this world, so that's just a guideline.
Okay.
I'm hoping that it's just a guideline, because I don't want to say that we're doing it by those dates.
Right.
Just FYI. And then whatever software we do go to, I think it's imperative that we look at, it's great to have no matter which manufacturer you go with, you'll understand in a second. If it's a Ford or if it's a Chevy, it's a good Ford, it's a good Chevy. It's not a Lamborghini that it's so temperamental that it's going to take a computer person and its task company to review it. It needs to be a good Chevy, a good Ford, whatever that is, whatever manufacturer you like. So that's my comments. Any other comments? Mr. Applegate, anything else?
Great presentation, and I'm sure James told you if you need any expert help, I'm happy to help.
And I'd be remiss by saying that with my presentation in my office with Rebecca and James, I'm glad that you two of you, even though we have a great consultant, that you two of you are there, because it made it very easy to understand. So thank you both. End of presentation. Okay, I think we can get through the consent agenda fairly quickly.
I think Rebecca wants to say something.
Rebecca?
For the record, Rebecca Hammock, Development Services Director. I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention and the public's attention that this is being funded from the building fund. It's an enterprise-funded project, and we do have it funded within a technology fund currently. So we're not asking for additional funding at this time. We're just presenting on our findings of the study. So.
Thank you for that clarification.
That was a great clarification given the morning.
Yes.
Okay.
It really was.
Pursuant to Florida law, the public has the right to be heard on all propositions except for the Board of County Commissioners enacting an administrative or emergency matters or conducting a meeting exempt from Section 286.011 Florida statute. Public comment time on proposals should be given 3 minutes for individuals, 6 minutes for groups. The right to be heard on during quasi-judicial hearings should be governed by Florida law. The public will be provided an opportunity to be heard on non-agenda items at the end of the meeting. And of course, all proper decorum will be observed at all times. We have consent agenda items 5 through 17. Mr. Applegate, is there any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay. Commissioners, any comments? Direction from the board.
I'll move approval of 5 through 14.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Move on to item number 15. Which is Village on the Green project.
Excuse me, did you ask for a member of the public on
I'm sorry.
consent?
Is there anyone in the public that'd like to be heard? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Shaney?
We do have some speakers for item 14.
Okay.
The first one is David Brown.
Mr. Brown, I apologize. Again, Mr. Brown, I apologize for my moving forward.
You kind of got to see the end of the movie before the beginning.
And that's great. Dave Brown, 785 Longwood Markham Road. And it sounds like you just voted.
Well, we're gonna retake that vote, so I'm sorry.
And no, I'm very happy.
He wants to vote.
Do a celebration dance. And I'm here in favor of item number 14 for a lot of reasons. Safety concerns for the residents and the pedestrians on Longwood Markham Road. And I had a little speech here, but at the end of the day, I'm very happy you're all support the safety of pedestrians in our community. I want to thank Commissioner O'Hara for her tenacity to get this done and the process, and that the county and the engineering and everyone's open to listen to the public and make the changes that are needed to keep everybody safe, the drivers, the pedestrians, the walkers, the bikers, to everybody. So just really briefly, thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl Brown.
Cheryl Brown? Ms. Brown, I apologize for moving so fast.
No problem. Good morning, Chairman Delary and the commissioners. I just want to say thank you very much for approving this. It has been a long 3-year journey to improve the safety of our community, the safety of our street. I was going to offer you a long list of terrible things that have happened, but I don't think that's necessary. I just want to say on behalf of myself, my fellow neighbors, the bears, and the bicyclists, I think this was a very important traffic calming decision that you've made to return a peace of mind and safety to our community. So I just, with all my heart, I say thank you for doing so.
Thank you.
Joe Humphreys.
Mr. Humphrey, I apologize as well.
Joe Humphreys, 883 Cardinal Point Cove, Sanford, Florida. I pretty much want to echo what you've just heard. Government's first responsibility is obviously preservation and protection of life. We saw the loss of life in our neighborhood. Being involved with the trails, I just had a guy that was one of the first people to build a house in my neighborhood. Had it for rent for the last 10 years, has never seen the trail along Longwood Markham. So he moved back in. He's a construction guy. And he said, he says, wow, this is great. He said, then I looked at it and he said, I realized, oh, this is an accident waiting to happen. And I told him, I said, well, Matt, unfortunately, that's already happened. So, but I told him about what was happening today and he was very supportive of that. And speaking on behalf of Ed's family, who I made a commitment to at the time, that because I know that Ed would have done the same thing if that would have been me out on Longwood Markham. So as I drove in today, there were lots of people on the trail on that road. The trailhead is busy all the time. I've met with and have gotten involved with some of the biking groups, and they've all concurred. They appreciate this effort. So again, thank you. I know that, again, as David said, this hasn't been easy. It's been a bit of a challenge, but that's okay. As my mom would say, anything worth doing takes effort. And we appreciate, again, the tenacity of the commissioner. This is, a lot of times these days, we have our doubts about our government at every level, but this is really something to be positive about. So again, thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank
Shani,
you.
any written
Thank
request?
you all as well.
Anyone else in the public that'd like to address the board? Seeing none, we'll recall the question. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Move on to item number 15.
excuse me, for the record, Paul Chipok, Acting County Attorney. This item is a required TEFRA hearing for the Village on the Green project for the issuance of bonds by the Palm Beach County Health Facilities Authority to issue the revenue bonds. This is, you are taking no responsibility or liability on behalf of Seminole County. This is just a formality that since the bonds are being issued for property in Seminole County, that the Board of County Commissioners has to acknowledge that.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, before we ask the question, anyone in the public? No written question. Anyone in the public would like to address the question? Seeing none, we'll close public input. All in favor of the motion, say by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Item number 16.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions from the public? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Mr. Applegate?
Mr. Chairman, you were kind enough this morning to ask the pastor to say a prayer for Tim and for his family. If I may, just for a moment. Tim Arkarpoulos, who passed away this week, the only way I can describe him is that Tim was the poster child for being a gentle giant with a gentle and kind soul. He will be missed by all the employees that he worked with. For me personally, he was always just so gracious and kind. I know a lot of employees feel the same way I do, that it really is a great and heartfelt loss. Tim put up a courageous battle. Prior to Tim being sick, he dedicated his life to taking care of his sister who was sick, his mom. He's just going to be remembered, and we lost not only a great employee, but really a great friend. And to his family and to his friends, they have all the employees' deepest sympathy, and he will be missed.
Mr. Chipok?
Thank you. Just wanted to announce that on December 6th, we have tentatively scheduled our annual ethics update for the board. And of course, we will invite the other county boards to attend that presentation as well. So just please mark it on your calendar. And again, it's tentative at this point. We're still coordinating, but that appears to be the date that we will do the update.
Any comments from the board? Commissioner Lockhart?
I would just add that in addition to inviting the other boards to participate, perhaps those who are under sunshine would be highly encouraged to participate. Every year we have new people joining the board, and sometimes that gets left out of the initial orientation.
Mr. Applegate?
That's a great point, and just recently I was reminded of that, and I've asked the county attorney's office to put together some general guidance that will be included in the packet that every new nominee will receive.
Commissioner Constantine?
The only other thing I would say, Paul, is that when I was writing it in my book of calendar, I noticed that there was another board meeting at 8:30 that day. I don't know which one it is, not ours, but something else, so just, take a look at that. I didn't know if it might harm one of us from being there. I couldn't remember.
I'd like to see an alternative date or a second date, or that first week of December. I'm typically not in town.
We'll coordinate.
We'll coordinate. Thanks.
Any other comments, Commissioner
Later
Herr?
in the day.
I just think we need to maybe get this on the record, that attendance at that session is not the only way to be compliant.
Right.
Because that was kind of sounding like that would be the only way to be compliant.
No.
That's correct. And Mr. Applegate, just want to echo, the board will echo your comments, I believe, about Tim. He is and will be greatly missed, and our hearts and prayers go out to not only him, but to his family. With that, we'll be adjourned and come back at 1:30. Going to recess.